Not everybody's here yet, and we'll be starting in about 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Let us start. Please tell me if you can hear me well. So today we continue our Green Skills Camp, um, and we'll go further into installation mounting of photovoltaic modules. Let us remember the main rules that will help us, that will allow us to communicate in a more comfortable way. So we will be asking you again to make sure that we can see your full names and country in your profile name in the Zoom account. Please state it correctly. Uh, also you can listen to the interpretation. We are providing interpretation into English, Spanish, and Chinese languages. And in the main channel, we'll be speaking Russian. Please choose the language on the bottom panel. And if there will be any questions from your side, please ask. Do not hesitate to
Recording in
ask them
progress.
in the chat, and the interpreter will be translating them from English into Russian. So yes, in case you don't know how to turn on the interpretation, please click the language sign on the bottom panel. There will be time for questions and answers for Q&A at the end of each session. But if you have any questions on the way, do not hesitate to ask them in the chat. We'll be reading them, and the experts will be replying to them. Also, please do turn off your mics if you're not speaking at the moment. Also, we will be taking the recording and we'll be streaming it on the YouTube, but we'll be recording it only in English and Russian languages. So in case you need a recording in Spanish or Chinese, please, unfortunately, since we unfortunately cannot make the recording in these languages, please do it on your own. So as for today's schedule, we'll have two stages for today's session, and there will be a small break between them. And it will be about the electrical switchboard installation, the photovoltaic modules switchboard installation. And now I pass the floor to our renewable energy sources expert, to Alexander Fedorov. Please wait for a bit while we're switching our camera to the venue. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm really glad to see all of you again today. We're glad that our event actually welcomes so many participants, and we are really grateful for feedback. So I do remind you again to ask any questions. If you have any, I will try to and answer to them all and reply to them all. So like I might have said earlier, we'll have a pre-recorded video on installation of the electrical switchboard, and it will be we'll have comments to the video by our trainer, by our chief coach Mikhail Berezin, who actually used to be a participant, used to be a competitor himself, so he knows what he is talking about. So we're ready to begin. Please stay with us. Good afternoon, colleagues. Right now, we will be showing you the assembly and the installation of the switchboard for photovoltaic modules. Here, the competitor begins to assemble a terminal box, industry grade. We had made some preparations from beforehand, the markings, and the competitor installs the control device, the control equipment onto the panel of the terminal box. Right now, he is installing the inverter onto the mounting plate. Onto the screw board. So he uses he screws it in using the screws. So after screwing the first screw, the first self-tapping screw, he starts to check the placement. The placement of the board using the measuring tool. And after the centering of the inverter is performed, the installation is actually begun. Now he goes to the circuit board, to the control board, to the battery control board. Installation. First, we have pre-made the holes, pre-created the holes, and then again using the self-tapping screws, he screws it in. First, of course, checking the position. While installing, we're using the electrical screw, and the torque is set at the minimum. We do not want the electrical screwdriver to be too strong because the base is too thin. So the torque is set to minimum. So after positioning and centering, we also complete the screwing in this device. And now the competitor goes into installation of the cable duct system, the perforated cable duct, which we would be needing for actually laying out the wires. This is an industry-grade terminal box, and we have the markings. We don't have the markings that were pre-installed and the cable ducts pre-installed. So we need to use this cable duct that we have prepared beforehand. So again, we have pre-made the holes using the very same screws, self-tapping screws. We are installing the cable ducts. Again, using the electrical screwdriver with the torque set at the minimum.
При монтаже кабельного канала перфорированного
So during the installation of the cable duct, it's well the best thing is to use the preferable measuring instrument for positioning for positioning the cable duct, such as angle pieces, rulers, etc.
совсем забыл сказать, при монтаже данного
What I
кабельного
forgot to tell you is that while we're installing the cable duct, we actually need to use the screw into the that we put into the screwdriver. The length of it should be over 100 millimeters, so that the installation would be more comfortable.
в тех местах, где у нас кабельный канал пересекается,
in these places that we have the layovers of the cable duct, we take away the pieces we don't need, so that it would be easier for us to actually later put in the wires.
Так как монтажная панель у нас имеет
So
достаточно,
since the circuit board here is quite large here, we might actually need to have an additional workplace, an additional table where we can put our devices or our tools.
на данном этапе участник приступает к
So at
монтажу.
this stage, the competitor begins to install the DIN rails. The DIN rails are also positioned and screwed in using the screws, the self-tapping screws of the same kind.
Участник подбирает компоненты.
Now the participant, the competitor, chooses the components that he needs to install, installs the circuit breakers, Well, they need to protect our equipment, and also to protect a competitor, to protect a person from electric shock. And next goes the power supply for the info panel to make the system work in a more stable way. And then installing the module, the cross module for connecting, commutating the zero wires, and for the grounding.
Так, надежно закрепил все элементы.
So once all the elements are fixed, the ground and neutral are fixed, now we have the stoppers, the equipment stoppers, so that the equipment would not fall out or move. Or in case we need to recommutate the equipment so that they wouldn't break. So within the installation, we are using the cell screwdriver because these these fixtures are quite thin and quite weak. And then we install the cover of the cross module. And next we begin to commutate the power wires from inverter into the switchboard.
Подключает проводники черного и красного цвета.
So the red and black wires are connected because we have the direct current here in this system. And then putting the wires into the cable duct.
В данном случае клеммная колодка у нас
In this case, the junction box has here a bolt of six surfaces, six surfaced bolts. So we won't be able to use a common screwdriver. And now the power wires are put in. So the plus wire has been connected. Now we are connecting the minus using the hexagonal screw.
укладывают проводники.
And then putting the wires into the cable duct.
Теперь подключают проводники.
And now we're going to connecting the wire cable, the wire cables to the charge controller. Same way, plus and minus, black and red.
Здесь тип винтового соединения сел, поэтому участник использует отвертку.
So here we can use the screwdriver because of the type of the bolt connection. That's why the competitor is using the screwdriver.
Укладывают проводники в перфорированный кабельный канал.
And again, putting the wires into the perforated cable duct.
Части кабельного канала под щитом участник не выламывает, так как
And the
проводники
parts of the cable duct that is under the board are not taken out. So now again, we don't need to break the cable duct because it's perforated. And then again, we are connecting the plus and the minus. They are of the smaller size. And here we use just the usual terminal. And now the competitor is installing the grounding onto the. In this case, he's using a wire with a diameter of with the section surface of 6 square millimeters, and the end piece for this is the usual sort of the usual sort, and we're using it to tighten up the terminals, the screw. What I forgot to tell you is that before that, all the wires were pressed using the insulation. And again, the grounding cable is also put into the cable duct.
проложил провод и подключает к
So after the wires are installed, they're connected to the cross module.
объединенную шину заземления.
And here we go with the grounding as well. And to cut the wires, now we use the side cutting instrument,
Откусывает, зачищает провод
the
автоматически.
side cutters. So which actually cut, which cut the wires, and then using the stripper, strips the wires, putting on the tips that is insulated, and crimps it using the crimping instrument, the crimper.
Подключает к шине заземления.
And connects it to the grounding and to the grounding piece of equipment.
Теперь участник
Now the
монтирует
competitor is installing
питание для
the power supply
системы
for making the system work in a more stable way.
блока питания на 24 вольта.
The 24 volt as a power supply unit that gives power to the control board and to the info panel.
Точно так же везде использует клеммы
Again, using the terminals,
штыревые втулочные с изолятором.
using the insulation. of a plugin pin type.
Для нулевого проводника используйте
For
цвета синего.
the blue wire grows for neutral
Белый цвет провода.
and white for the phase.
Сечением 2,5 квадрата.
The section is 2.5 square millimeters.
Аппарат защиты номиналом 10 ампер.
And the circuit breaker nominal is 10 ampere.
Включает трехжильный кабель типа ПВС.
So now we are connecting the 3-wire cable.
Опрессовывает отдельные жилы наконечниками.
And crimping the wires, the separate wires with the tips.
Так как наконечники неподходящей длины, обрезает их.
So since the tips length are not necessarily of the length that we need, the competitor cuts them so that the length would match the needs with the sizes.
Подключает проводник к аппарату защиты.
And now we're commutating the inverter, connecting the wire to the circuit board, to the circuit breaker.
Фазу и ноль подключает к автомату.
The phase and the neutral are connected to the circuit breaker, and the grounding is connected to the cross module.
Укладывает проводник в кабельном канале и
Again, the wire is laid into the cable duct, and it's connected to the inverter's input to input to put in the AC from the outside. We need that in case when there is no electrical current that's coming that would come in for a long time, or maybe in case of maintenance.
Теперь участник подключает.
Now the competitor is connecting the AC output cable that goes from the inverter using the cover, using the cable cover on the inverter.
Укладывает проводник и подключает штекер в инвертор.
So the cable again is put into the cable duct, and the plug is plugged into the inverter.
Прокладывает коммутационный провод для
A
связи
commutation cable is installed
блока защиты с инвертором.
to connect the circuit breaker with the inverter.
Так как данный проводник
And since the
выходит на две
wire is going outside, is going to the upper part of the switchboard,
в некоторых местах,
so in some places the
в
wires,
местах открытия двери,
so especially where the door is opened
где дверь висит на петлях,
or where door is hanging on the hinges,
провод будет
there would be
провисать.
some places where the
Механических
the wire would be
специальных
able to be exposed to damage. So to prevent the wire from being damaged, we are wrapping up the wires using this spiral wrap.
На данном этапе
So at this stage,
начинает
the competitor begins to install the box itself onto the wall.
для удобства монтажа щита
And to make it easier, to make it more comfortable,
используем специальный уровень, который
we use the measure level
щита закрепляем
that we fix onto the wall before installation,
место крепления
just below the lower part of the box, of where the box would be installed. What do we need that for?
форм-фактора и
Well, since the box itself is quite large and heavy, it's quite difficult for just one participant to install it. And so that the competitor would not uh, be needing to require the services of another competitor or of a helper, we actually pre-install this kind of level.
начинает установку.
So the installation of the box is beginning.
Устанавливает щит на уровень.
The box is installed on top of the level. Then the box is centered according to the marks.
Фанера деревянная.
And then, well, since the wall is wooden, the box is fixed using the screws.
Так мы данный корпус щита установили сразу на уровень.
So since we positioned the box onto the level, we will not have to check the horizontal positioning of the box.
Закручивает остальные крепления.
And now the other screws are screwed in.
После монтажа остается только проверить.
After the installation, we only need to check the vertical position.
Установка монтажной платы.
And then we install the switchboard inside the box.
В этот момент у нас уже скоммутировано все
At this moment, all the devices are already commutated and connected, and the wires that will be later going onto the door of the box are already ready. So the competitor checks if the switchboard is fixed neatly.
Начинает монтаж гаек, на которые монтируется сама.
And then installs the nuts onto which the switchboard itself is installed.
Заземляет
Also, the competitor performs the grounding of the sidewalls and of the sidewall and of the door of the box.
кабель используем все тот же самый, желто-зеленый для заземления.
So the yellow-green cable is used for the grounding,
6
same as
квадратов
before.
метров.
The section is 6 square millimeters.
Он у нас мягкий, много.
It has several wires within, and it is quite soft.
Оптимальную.
So the optimal length is chosen by the competitor,
Производит опрессовку.
and then to the crimping using the tips.
Скручивает его в спираль, так как у нас
And then
при
makes it into a spiral
включении-выключении электроустановки либо
Be-
при обслуживании будет открываться дверь.
because if when we turn the equipment on or off, or when we perform the maintenance, the door will be opened. So the length that we need would differ. So we make it into a spiral so that when we open the door, it would become longer and become shorter naturally when we close the door, so that the wire would not be sagging when the door is closed and would not rupture, would not break when the door is open.
Отмеряет проводник по кабельному каналу.
And then the wire is measured onto the using the cable duct until the cross module.
Включает провод заземления.
So So the grounding cable is connected.
Укладывает его.
The cable is put inside the cable duct.
Так, на этом мы с вами остановим.
And here we would make a brief stop. So, dear colleagues, we will be having a 10 minutes break right now. You can take a rest, drink some coffee or tea, and please come back in 10 minutes.
Господа, мы продолжаем. Так, господа, ну у нас был
So,
небольшой...
dear colleagues, we had a small break and now we'd like to continue.
Участник производит монтаж проводника
The competitor
корпуса щита.
installs the wire and connects it to the terminal at the side wall onto of the box, and they're using the screwdriver to do it.
Так как щит данного исполнения имеет
So since the box here here we have the grounding unit on the switchboard, so we have to ground it as well to perform the ground as well.
отдельный провод.
So that's why we need a separate cable for that.
На данном этапе
So the next stage, the next thing we do at the installation
от монтажной платы до дверцы щита,
on the wires that go from the switchboard to
то мы приклеиваем
the box, we
самоклеющиеся
we glue the self-adhesive tape onto the wires,
хомутов нейлоновых стяжек
and using nylon ties, nylon cable ties, we install the wires.
Если щит с завода имеет плохую обработку,
If the box
которую
if the box that you received from a factory or from a plant is not in a perfect condition, it is recommended that before installation you degrease the surface.
выверяет оптимальную длину радиуса сгиба,
Checking the optimal length and tying up the wires using the nylon ties.
Приклеивает данные платформы через небольшое расстояние, дабы избежать
And gluing them with some distance, so that would be the safer and the optimal way for the wire.
укладывает проводники в кабельный канал и подключает к шине заземления.
Putting the wires into the cable duct and connecting them across module.
Белый зажим, если вы имеете в виду вот эту самоклеющуюся платформу, то она так и называется. Квадратная. Самоклеющаяся платформа.
If you mean about the question of the white clip, if you mean the square thing, the square white self-adhesive platform, well, it's what we call it, the self-adhesive platform, and it comes in different sizes, 20 to 20 millimeters, depending on the task that a competitor has. So then next thing is the info cable is starting to be installed, as well as the power supply cable for the info panel.
Монтирует провода в спиралайте.
So the next thing is the wires. The wires are wrapped up by the spiral wrap, and there is some spare wires left on the door, some spare length, and then we go into installing the base for the information for the info panel. So the panel is fixed onto the installed onto the door, and we have pre-made the hose for the installation, and we use the screws, the M4 screws, 4 of them for the panel. So since the frame itself has clamps, we only need to install the panel, the info panel, into the frame. And the installation is solid. In case we need to take off this panel for cleaning or maintenance, we won't need to unscrew any screws. We will only need an SL screwdriver. We'll just apply some pressure to the clips, apply some pressure to the clamps, and the panel will come off. So now we are connecting the info panel using the power wires, the plus and the minus, the red and the black, and the UTP cable for the information signal that comes from the inverter.
подключает UTP кабель
The UTP cable is connected to its appropriate socket, and the power supply cables are also connected so that they would supply power to the panel. In the very same way, the red cable, no, the black cable, the black cable with the pre-made plug-in that goes from the charge controller.
Так как кабель неподходящей длины, обрезает и зачищает.
So, since the length of the cable is not the one that we need, the cable is cut and stripped.
Клемму подключения на информационной панели у нас имеет
And the terminals where we put in the cables are actually the clamps. So the clamp type terminal, we need to put in the screwdriver, to apply some pressure, and to insert the wire.
во избежание провиса кабеля.
So for the cable to not be sagging, it is fixed by nylon ties.
Откусывает лишние хвостики на стяжку.
And the pieces of the ties that we don't use, we cut off.
Переходит к коммутации аккумулятором.
So now we go to the batteries, the commutation of the batteries. We have two electric storage batteries. The voltage is 12 volts each, and capacity for 100 ampere hours. They're connected in series.
Для подключения клемм аккумулятора используют все те же.
And we use the very same tips that we used before to connect the terminals, cutting the wires according to the length we need, the red one and the black one.
Монтирует проводник к клемме аккумулятора.
And the wire is installed, it's connected to the battery's terminal using the screws, M6 type.
Смотрите, провод длинный, потому
So since so why the wire is long? It's the first set that we received. So in order for us to conduct the further trainings, we actually make the training on how long should our cable be. So we decided not to cut it in advance, so that we would be able to train the competitors on cutting the cable. That's about this particular task.
подключает выводные клеммы с АКБ.
And then the output terminals of the batteries are also connected.
Устанавливает аккумуляторы.
The batteries are installed.
заводит проводники.
The wires are put into the box.
Подключает их к клемникам.
And they are connected to the junction box.
Укладывает проводники в кабельном канале.
The wires are set into the cable ducts.
Да, использование автомобильного аккумулятора допускается.
And yes, we can use a car's battery, but you would need to think in advance so that the car's battery, the battery and the equipment you'll be using, that they would be corresponding to each other.
Опять же, по поводу аккумуляторных батарей.
About the batteries, the inverter here can work with up to 1 kilowatt of electric power. So if the batteries that you found, well, you need to check if they give the stable, the direct current, if they don't overheat, if the capacity, if the power is 1 kilowatt. If they can work with 1 kilowatt, then you can use it. And preferably for the battery to have a higher capacity.
В данном случае мы рассматриваем электроустановку именно малогабаритную.
In this case, since we're having a small scale, a small scale, small caliber a piece of equipment, and that can be used within the household. And so, if we use a battery of increased capacity, we can actually use them for these purposes.
разделывает кабель и производит подключение.
And then we're connecting the cable after we put it through the sidewall.
Кабель подключает к аппаратам защиты.
And the cable is connected to the circuit breakers, the protection devices,
Данный кабель нужен для именно питания
which we need
данной системы.
to provide the power supply to the system from the outside in case we don't have solar power for a while, or our photovoltaic modules do not work due to weather conditions, to rain, snow, etc., to control the operation of the inverter, of the batteries, and of the charge controller. We need, that's why we need some power supply from the outside circuit. If we have the solar energy provided constantly in a stable way from the outside environment, we don't need to provide the electric energy from an outside circuit.
В данный момент участник подключает розетку.
So at this moment, we connect the socket on 230 volt, which would be connected to the inverter's output. We do it in order to be able to get some to get some electricity that was generated by our solar panels and remade through went through the inverter. So this socket, this would be the socket for the devices that we would be using to get energy from the solar panels. Again, if we need to perform a different task with different criterions, we can connect a different socket or reroute the electricity into a common circuit.
Так. Секундочку.
About the ultracell question, please wait for a moment while I check.
тот, кто задавал вопрос по поводу модели аккумулятора я сейчас напишу в общий чат.
About the model of the battery, I will write it, will post it to the chat in a moment.
На данном этапе участник
On this stage, the competitor performs the installation of the cable in the open using the installation clips, the round ones, using a nail.
При монтаже данных клипс
While these clips and ties are installed, a measuring instrument is used, the level measure.
рядом с кабелем вывода электричества.
So next to the output cable, the computer installs the power supply on the power supply cable that goes from the outside circuit. In this case, the cable is installed, and then we have some loop, some spare cable that would be installed, that would be connected to our network.
Теперь участник Для крепления проводников от аккумулятора использует все те же скобы с гвоздем.
So to fix the cables, we use the same clamps using the nails, but of a smaller size.
Точно так же, как и в случае с
So in the same way as we had with connecting the batteries in series, the wires here that go from the series, we do not cut them because we only have one wire, one cable. We decided to save it and not to cut it in this case.
Теперь участник подключает кабель, который он уже
And
заранее
now the competitor connects the cable that had already been connected to the socket is now connected to the output channel of the inverter. Here we have alternating current of 230 volt.
так как заранее у нас при коммутации щита
Since during the commutation of the box and of the switchboard,
было выведено
we had already power supply driven out onto the switchboard, onto the terminals, so we don't have to connect it directly to the inverter.
устанавливают крышки перфорированного кабельного канала.
So then the covers of the perforated cable duct are installed, and the competitor checks if the covers are fixed solidly and firm.
Закрывает крышки и
So the covers are closed, and at the same time, putting in the cables, putting the wires that could have fallen out from the duct.
На этом все. Электроустановка наша готова.
So this is it, and our equipment is ready to be operating. We only need to connect it to the photovoltaic modules, which we will be showing you tomorrow. If any of you has any kind of questions about the technology, I'm ready to provide you with a reply, or if you have any questions pertaining to this task. Dear colleagues, thank you for joining our today's session. Let us give thanks to our expert, Mikhail, for a wonderful webinar. Please do tell me if there are any questions. You can use the chat to ask the questions, or you can turn on your mic and ask the questions. If there are no questions at the moment, that would be it for today. That would be the end of the session for today. And if you have any questions later, you can write them down and either ask them tomorrow or send them the questions to our email that you can see on your screens. Also, as we said, the Russian version is already on the YouTube, and the English version will need some time. It will be there in several days. So for today, we had the workshop on the installation of the switchboard, and we are waiting for you tomorrow on our tomorrow's workshop about the connecting the connecting the photovoltaic modules to the switchboard and putting it into operation. And the start time is the same, 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Moscow time. Let me check again if there are any questions. No questions as far as I can see. So that would be it for today. Thank you for your attention.